Don't know if she's out here being hurt. You don't know if she's is she locked up somewhere? So you think about her every single day. Is she okay? Is she safe?
So we start with a story nearly 7 years after she went missing. We're talking about the remains of Paige Coffey because they have been found.
They found her in a garbage bag at a vacant property on the east side of Cleveland. Years after police told her family she was probably just mentally ill, maybe on vacation somewhere. Vacation. That's what they said about a woman who had not called her mother, had not shown up to work, had not contacted a single soul she loved. Anyways, her name was Paige Coffey. She was 27 years old. And the man who was last seen walking beside her on that surveillance camera, he's still out there. Paige Noel Natasha Coffey was born on December 8, 1991, in Cleveland, Ohio. She was the first grandchild in her family. And anybody who grew up as the first grandchild knows what that means. You are loved differently. You are watched over. You matter in a way that is hard to put into words. She was close with her brother, her cousins, her aunts, her grandparents. Her mother, Trinetta Williamson, was her person. That bond between them was tight. The kind of tight where you don't just disappear without a word. Moving on, Paige was sharp. She attended Charles F. Brush High School, graduated in 2010, and went on to Youngstown State University, where she studied fashion merchandising. Now that tells you something about her. Fashion merchandising is not a degree you choose because someone told you to. You choose it because you have an eye for things, because you see beauty where other people see fabric. Paige was that kind of person. Creative, artistic, expressive. The way she dressed was never an accident. It was a statement. After school, she settled into life across the Cleveland suburbs, Copley, Oakwood Village, South Euclid. She worked at Torrid, a retail clothing store in Macedonia, Ohio. People who knew her described her the same way every time: dependable, artistic, the kind of person who shows up. Let me tell you something. When people describe someone as dependable and that person suddenly disappears without a trace, that's your first red flag. Because dependable people don't just vanish. In 2012, she married her high school sweetheart, Tad Coffey. They were together for 5 years before the marriage ended in divorce in late 2017. After that, Paige moved forward with her life, and by 2019, she had started dating a man named Patrick Samar Mason Jr., known to everyone around him as PJ. That relationship would cost Paige everything. Now look, PJ was not a good man, and that is not speculation. That is a documented, on-the-record fact. The police were called to that relationship multiple times, domestic violence reports, a man with a criminal history that included robbery, menacing with a weapon, and violence against women. This was not somebody Paige's family was happy about. They were scared for her, and they had every reason to be. The abuse Paige experienced in that relationship was not your everyday argument. She confided in friends about what was happening behind that front door: strangulation, shooting, stabbing, burning, rape. Read that list again. That was the reality of her day-to-day life with this man. And then came the moment that should have been the final chapter of their relationship. PJ told police that Paige had shot him in the head. He sent a photo of the wound and a written confession, supposedly from Paige, directly to her mother, Trinetta. When officers arrived, both of them were taken in and placed under mental health evaluation. It came out during that process that Paige may have been bipolar, but here's what Paige told her mother afterward. She said she did not shoot PJ. She said he was the one who had grazed himself, shot himself, and then held her at gunpoint and forced her to write that confession with a weapon pointed at her. Think about that. This man manufactured evidence against the woman he was abusing, and used her own mother as the delivery system. After that, Paige was done. She told Trinetta she was leaving PJ for good. She was never going back. Anyways, by the spring of 2019, Paige was staying with her grandparents in Bratenahl, a small suburb that sits right along Lake Erie. She didn't have a car at the time, so she was getting rides and using Uber to commute to her job in Macedonia. She was making it work. She was trying. On April 30th, 2019, Paige called her mother and asked for a ride to a friend's house. Trinetta, not thinking anything of it, said yes. She drove her daughter across town and dropped her off. She didn't know she was dropping her off at PJ's house in Oakwood Village. She didn't know that was the last time she would ever see her daughter alive. When Paige didn't come home, Trinetta started calling. She called Paige. She called everyone she could think of. And she called PJ. He told her he had no idea where Paige was. Hadn't seen her in months, he said. Months. This man looked Paige's mother in the face, well, over the phone, and lied to her. Because just days after Paige was dropped at his house, the two of them were caught together on security camera at Home Depot inside Steelyard Commons on May 7, 2019. That footage, grainy, ordinary-looking, devastating in hindsight, became the last confirmed sighting of Paige Coffey. When Trinetta confronted PJ with this, told him she knew the truth, told him she had seen the footage, he hung up the phone. Moving on, days turned into a week. A week turned into another. Paige missed Mother's Day. She did not call. And for a woman as close to her mother as Paige was, that silence was deafening. Trinetta officially reported her daughter missing to Bratenahl police on May 17, 2019. And that's when things went from bad to worse, because the police didn't take it seriously. Instead of looking at PJ, a man with a documented violent history, a man who was the last person seen with Paige, a man who had already lied about his contact with her, they cleared him quickly and moved on. And then, to make matters worse, they suggested Paige might be mentally ill, that she was out somewhere, relaxing, taking a break. Trinetta Williamson is a mother. She knows her child, and she knew that her daughter, the dependable one, the one who showed up, the one who called, would never go silent like this without a reason. She pushed back. She kept pushing. She never stopped pushing. And eventually, investigators did launch a formal investigation. But the damage from those early weeks of dismissal, that time, it does not come back. Now here is where the story gets frustrating. And I mean deeply frustrating. The Bratenahl Police Department did eventually open a formal investigation. They ran interviews. They executed search warrants. They worked with local, county, state, and federal partners. On paper, it looked like movement. But in practice, the case kept hitting walls, and the biggest wall had a name. PJ. Let me tell you something. When Paige's friend Vanessa reached out to PJ trying to get answers, he didn't deny knowing Paige. He just started talking in circles. He said he had texted her a few times but claimed she had been acting erratic. Then he said she had changed her phone number, which he used to explain why nobody could reach her. Just convenient enough to sound like an excuse, just vague enough to be useless. And the family? They were not buying a single word of it. Because think about what they already knew. Trinetta had dropped Paige off at PJ's house herself. The surveillance footage from Steelyard Commons had them together on May 7th. And now this man was on the phone telling people he barely knew where Paige was. His own family members, his own people, had gone to police and told them they were worried about Paige's safety. When the people closest to you are raising alarms about what you might have done, that is not a small thing. Moving on, investigators also started looking at PJ's background more carefully. And what they found painted a very clear picture of who this man was. His criminal record included robbery attempts, domestic violence charges, and a menacing charge involving a weapon. This was not a man with one bad day on his record. This was a pattern. A long, documented, undeniable pattern. His car also disappeared around the same time Paige did. PJ claimed he sold it, but there was no record of a sale, no paperwork, no buyer, nothing. Anyways, despite all of it, the lies, the record, the missing car, the family members raising red flags, law enforcement explained they could not move on PJ without concrete physical evidence. No blood, no DNA. Nothing they could take to a prosecutor and say, "Here, this is what happened." Police Chief Chuck Lello made a statement during this period that was careful, very carefully worded. He said that they had spoken to dozens of people connected to the case, and that none of them had been definitively cleared of involvement in Paige's disappearance. Read between the lines on that one. When a police chief says nobody has been cleared, he is not talking about casual acquaintances. He is talking about people investigators are actively watching, and still, no arrest. In February of 2020, the Cleveland Bureau of Investigation stepped in, bringing fresh eyes and renewed resources to the case. Paige's family, who had never stopped fighting, raised the reward for information to $5,000. They were out in the streets distributing flyers. They were calling anyone who would listen. Trinetta Williamson was not a woman who was going to sit down and accept silence. Around that same time, something gave the family a small flicker of hope. A Thanksgiving news segment aired footage from St. Augustine Hunger Center on Cleveland's west side, and someone in that footage looked like it could be Paige. The family responded immediately, flooding the surrounding area with flyers, knocking on doors, trying to chase down that possibility. It turned out to be a lead that didn't hold, but it showed you just how desperate and how determined this family was to find their person. Now, investigators also began looking seriously at the 10-day gap between May 7th, when Paige was last seen on camera, and May 17th, when she was officially reported missing. That window matters, because whatever happened to Paige, it happened in there somewhere. And the longer that gap stayed unexplained, the more pressure it put on the one person who was with her during that time. PJ, let me tell you something else. During the investigation, text messages surfaced, messages where Paige had confided in friends about what she was going through in that relationship. The things she described were not arguments. They were not rough patches. She talked about being strangled, shot, stabbed, burned, raped. By the same man who was now telling police he barely knew where she was. Those messages existed. Law enforcement had them. And still, the threshold for an arrest was not met. That is the reality of cases like this. Knowing and proving are two entirely different things. And in the absence of physical evidence, a woman's own words, words she wrote to protect herself, words that documented her abuse, were not enough to put the man who hurt her behind bars. By July 2024, 5 years after Paige vanished, Cleveland's 19 News launched a series called The Missing, shining a spotlight on unsolved disappearances across Northeast Ohio. Paige's case was the first story they told. It brought fresh attention. New tips started coming in, and Chief Lello reaffirmed that the case was still active, still open, and that somebody out there knew what happened to Paige Coffey. Also in January of that year, Ohio had launched a specialized work group, 24 experts from across the state brought together specifically to tackle missing persons cases that had gone cold. And the reason that work group existed at all? Trinetta Williamson. Her persistence. Her refusal to let her daughter become a statistic that law enforcement quietly filed away. That woman kept the case alive with her bare hands. Moving on. While no formal charges had been filed and no suspects had been publicly named, PJ was not living freely either. At some point after Paige's disappearance, he was arrested and incarcerated for an unrelated crime. So while justice for Paige remained out of reach, the man her family believed was responsible was behind bars, just not for the right reason. Not yet. As of the time this story is being told, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with Paige Coffey's death. The investigation remains active. The FBI's Cleveland field office is involved. A $10,000 reward is on the table for anyone with information, and tips can be submitted anonymously. The FBI released a statement after Paige's remains were identified, and part of what they said was this: "This case is far from over, and the FBI will continue to work with and support our law enforcement partners to ensure Paige's killer or killers are identified, found, and brought to justice." Killer or killers. Plural. That word choice is intentional. Federal agencies do not use language carelessly. Bratenahl police had already identified Paige's former boyfriend as a person of interest before the remains were ever found. That status has not changed. And with the FBI now fully involved and the case reclassified from a missing persons investigation to a homicide, the pressure on that person of interest is no longer the same as it was in 2019. The evidence being gathered now is being gathered with a murder in mind. For 6 years, Paige Coffey was a missing person. Her face on flyers, her name in news segments, her mother on the phone, in police stations, in meetings with investigators, refusing to let the world forget that her daughter existed and that somebody knew where she was. And then, on April 17th, workers showed up to clean out a vacant property on the east side of Cleveland. A routine job. The kind of work nobody thinks twice about. Clearing out a house that had been sitting empty, collecting time. And then they found her. Inside a garbage bag. Not buried. Not hidden in some elaborate way. A garbage bag. Left at a vacant home like she was something to be thrown away. Like her life meant nothing. Like nobody was ever going to come looking. They were wrong about that last part. Officers responded to the property at around 12:15 in the afternoon. The scene was processed. The remains were collected. And because of the condition of what was found, skeletal remains, identification was not immediate. It took the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office, DNA analysis, and time. But the answer came back exactly the way the family feared it would. It was Paige. Trinetta Williamson was notified before the public announcement was made on April 29th. Think about that phone call. Think about what it means to spend 6 years fighting for your child. Calling, pushing, pleading, refusing to sit down. And then have someone call you to confirm the thing you prayed every single day would not be true. That call does not have words for it. Anyways, the cause and manner of Paige's death have not been officially released. The investigation is active. But what is known is this: Paige did not end up in a garbage bag at a vacant property by accident. She did not walk there. She did not put herself there. Somebody did that to her. Somebody made that decision. Somebody drove to that property, left her there, and then went on living their life. And that somebody has not been charged. The organization Cleveland Missing released a statement on behalf of Paige's family after the identification was confirmed. They said the family was devastated by the loss and deeply grateful to everyone who kept searching and kept her story alive over the years. Devastated and grateful. Both of those things at the same time.
You know, when the person goes missing, you just go into overdrive of looking for them. And then as the years go on, you continue to hold out hope that they're going to be found and that they're going to come home. And so I always say, you know, families are stuck in purgatory, so to speak, right? You're grieving, but you don't really know why you're grieving. Say they are devastated would be an understatement, and you always hold out hope, right? And so they continue to hold out hope. This is a whole nother level of devastation for the family. I don't believe in closure, and I'm not sure that the family does either. I think that it's just today they'll be able to really start grieving.
That right there is what grief looks like when it has been stretched across 6 years of not knowing. The last confirmed sighting of Paige Coffey remains that surveillance footage from May 7, 2019, her walking through Steelyard Commons with PJ. That grainy image is still the last frame the world has of her alive, and the man walking beside her in it has never been arrested for what happened to her. Not yet. Paige Coffey was a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a friend. She was creative and dependable, and loved in a way that does not just disappear when a person does. What her case leaves behind is not just grief. It is a question that too many families across this country are forced to live inside of. What does it take for law enforcement to act? How many red flags have to wave before someone with a badge and the authority to do something does something? Paige's family pointed at PJ from the very beginning. They had the history. They had the lies. They had the text messages. They had the surveillance footage. And they were told to wait. Let me tell you something. Trinetta Williamson did not wait quietly. She fought. She pushed until Ohio created an entire work group of 24 experts dedicated to cold missing persons cases. Her daughter's disappearance literally changed the system. That is not a small thing. That is a mother turning her pain into policy. Moving on, if you know anything about what happened to Paige Coffey, anything at all, the FBI's Cleveland field office wants to hear from you. The number is 2-165-2214-00. You can also reach Crime Stoppers of Cuyahoga County at 216-252-7463. Your identity can remain completely anonymous. A $10,000 reward is still on the table. Paige deserved better than what happened to her. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to keep showing up, to work, to family dinners, to her mother's phone calls on Mother's Day. She was 32 years old when they found her, and somebody knows exactly how she got into that bag.